On this week's full-time roundup, Premier League is back with a bang. Barca leave it late as they digest the resignation of their gaffer, or might I say, entrenador. The parody continues in AFCON/Asian Cup. We recap a quiet January transfer window, and we predict the best games this weekend. Full-time roundup starts right now. Welcome this week to Full-Time Roundup. We have a special guest, a recurring guest now, I can say, Euan Reynard. Is it Reynard?
Yeah, Reynard, spot on there.
I should have probably asked and clarified that beforehand, but who cares? Euan, it is 55 degrees right now at 5 o'clock on a Thursday. Beautiful weather outside. How's England right now?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm going to be giving you a different type of temperature, aren't I? Because there's the whole Celsius Fahrenheit thing we've got to navigate. But 7 degrees Celsius, which is 44.
I'm converting it right now. 44.
Yeah, that's not too bad actually to say that I'm 5 hours ahead. I don't know why I've got this fleece on right now. This is t-shirt weather to say it's February in the UK. But yeah, buzzing to be here, mate. Like you say, recurring guest, and yeah, every time it's a pleasure. So excited to get into this with you.
Yep, Euan is filling in this week as Matt had a conflict, but that doesn't stop us here at Full-Time Roundup. And let's go ahead and dive right in. EPL is back, like I said in the intro. Honestly, this might be biased just coming off the game that just took place, but I mean, for some midweek football, this was one of the most entertaining slates from start to finish that I've seen in a while. And we'll go ahead and start it off with probably the most important one. Euan, this is the only game I wish Matt could be here to discuss with, as we are going to discuss Liverpool versus Chelsea right now. He was still so angry that he didn't even comment on the match today as I asked him. But Liverpool absolutely embarrassed Chelsea at Anfield. You DM'd me during the match and said, just don't even show up if you're going to show up like that as a Chelsea standpoint. You got some of the most wild displays of all time. Nunez hitting the post/crossbar 4 times, but somehow still getting an assist. You got the 20-year-old Northern Ireland, Connor Bradley, putting in a vintage display with a goal and 2 assists, replacing Trent Alexander-Arnold. And then you have the billionaire rec team that is Chelsea right now. Do you know what rec team is, or do I have to?
No, I get the reference. I'm just know that enough about American culture to get that. If you go any further, I might be lost, but I get what you mean by that.
Okay, cool. Euan, what did we watch in terms of the Chelsea side? What was that?
Yeah, you mentioned that I messaged you during the game, just referencing how much of a non-performance it was, and I think that the issue is with Chelsea, the way that they set up. You're looking for some kind of purpose from a team set up in a game like that. Like, you're not going to get harder games than playing Liverpool at Anfield. So you want to have some purpose in what they're doing. You understand if they're going to be a bit more reserved, they're going to be defensive, do whatever, this and that. But it was hard to find purpose out of what they were doing, especially out of possession. I don't think it was very well thought through. One of the issues that they have is that they go without a recognised striker, and on paper, I suppose you get that because they're bringing in more midfielders, they're bringing in players who maybe are more effective in transition in that way. But the problem is that out of possession, what it did it brought Conor Gallagher really high up into the press, which is one of the worst things I feel like they can do, because once you bring him high up into it in terms of first line stuff, and you have him next to Cole Palmer, you're losing a bit of intensity out of your midfield, which I don't think you get from the athletic profiles of Enzo and Caicedo. So you're already losing there. And think about this game, how much of it, when it was competitive before it got into the high scores, how much of it did you recognise it was spent camped in Chelsea's half/own third?
A lot of it. Now, I will caveat this with the fact that there is some personnel Nkunku off the bench. Nico Jackson was at AFCON, and they just shipped off Armando Broja today to Fulham. But with that, why wouldn't he put up a classic number 9 instead of the false 9 that Cole Palmer is playing? That is an interesting question.
Yeah. Speaking of our messages, I said before the game that this is a game I would have started Broja in, just to have a recognised number 9 who can get you out of jail with a bit of hold-up play, and is a little bit better athletically profiled to do frontline stuff than Cole Palmer would be. I feel like by setting up the way they do, you make Conor Gallagher less effective out of possession, which is his bread and butter, and you also make Cole Palmer a little bit less effective in possession, which is, at the moment, he's probably their best player and most effective player outlet in terms of scoring. Combine that with the fact that Raheem Sterling, in a game where you're not going to have the ball, is ostensibly pretty useless. And I just don't, I struggle to find much purpose in the way that they set up. So, like I say, I ask you how much of that game was spent when it was competitive in Chelsea's own third, in Chelsea's own half. That wasn't as much by design of parking the bus or anything like that, even though they did play really defensive. They wanted to get out in transition and get a little bit higher when they had the opportunities. If anyone watches this game back, look at how eager they are to get up in transition and be up the field when they do have those opportunities. They ended up having to play this way because their out of possession structure and what they were intending to do was incredibly muddled. And their plan of what I could piece together of what seemed like their plan didn't work at all. And a team like Liverpool, if you have any kind of weakness like that, is going to expose it in the worst way. And that's exactly what they did.
Yep. And you mentioned, exposing one team. Liverpool sit 5 points ahead of City, but City played Burnley this week. And, a little rematch between Pep and Vincent Kompany, an ex-player of his. You gave me gun to my head what would happen. I would have probably told you by at least 3 they'd win by. It'd probably be ugly, but not too ugly, just out of respect for Kompany. But, City, it was always inevitable, but you can't, as I always say, you can't beat yourself. And that second goal that City scored off that quick free kick was just an encapsulation of Burnley's season. I feel like they actually didn't play that bad. Maybe I'm being nice here, but they just gave up really soft goals and it ended up being a pretty high score line here. But I feel like it was Holland's back now. KDB got 70 minutes under his belt. So City are definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I would I feel like I'd be less harsh about the second goal than you would be. I do think it's still pretty clever free kick routine. And, if you pin everyone high on one side of the box and you get the ball quickly into that space, it's a little bit both sides. It's a little bit lazy on Burnley's part, but it's also a fun routine. I almost wondered if using a free kick routine like that in a game like Burnley at home was almost a little bit of a waste. A game that you would probably win anyway.
I see your point, but also Julian Alvarez just scored, 5 minutes before that. So how are you going to leave, out of all people you want to leave open to do that routine? He's probably one that I'd want to mark the most. So I still think it's, a bit of a lapse of concentration, I guess you could say. But at the end of the day, this result wasn't inevitable. So I feel like we don't really have to talk too much about it. But to move on to third, Arsenal, big back on track result against Forest. Matt Turner not covering himself in glory here with that first goal, but Arsenal always looked like they were going to win this game. They left it a little bit late due to their ongoing discussion about them not having a good enough number 9. But did you have any points in this match, or was it this was always inevitable, kind of like the City match?
Yeah, fairly inevitable. I think Forest, it's a little bit different because Forest are a little bit of a better side and they were also playing at home. I think the main point with this is that Arsenal kind of continue to be whatever the viewer would want them to be, which is, you can either say they're an incredibly impotent side, given the standard that they used to be at, and they don't create chances anywhere near the way that they used to. Or you can look at them and say, this is a side that's become much more reserved, sacrificed that, and now doesn't surrender really anything in terms of defensive lapses or giving cheap opportunities up to opposition. And we're at the stage now where we're into February. That's probably who they are. There's not going to be this great awakening offensively. There's not going to be this lapse defensively that's waiting over the hill. They are who they are, and it's just up to the fan to just determine whether they think that means they can contend for the title, or whether that means they're going to fall a fair bit off the pace. So yeah.
I shook my head because there's no way I think they compete for the title at this point. But I did want to pose a question to you. I was in my apartment on the treadmill, and I usually talk to this guy who kind of comes in at the same time as me, and he's an Arsenal fan. And I mean, I think this was a rash statement by him, but he was like, if they don't, get any silverware with all the money spent, Arteta maybe should find himself on the hot seat. I don't agree with that, but I'd wonder how you feel about that.
That's pretty ridiculous, I think.
Okay. That's what I thought.
I think you're right. I think you're right having your feeling the way you feel about that. They did spend a lot of money, though. They did spend a lot of money. They went and got Jesus and Zinchenko from City, and they haven't exactly panned out. But they've also had to deal with injuries and this and that. So the midfield is a bit light. Yeah, they had an effective. Well, that they spent that money obviously in the summer that's now about 18 months ago, and overall you have to say that was kind of a success. It's more the money that's been spent now. Basically, I say the money spent now. It's the Havertz thing. That basically covers everything. The fact that they were insistent on bringing him in for the money that they did, and the fact that to some people it's working, to other people it isn't. That again, it kind of encapsulates their team in its entirety at the moment. Havertz, like you say, you don't think they can compete for the title. I think they'll be closer than you probably do. I don't think you're a Havertz guy. I am. We just fall on different sides of this, and it's gonna be the thing that defines their season. It could end up defining Arteta. Players like him who are profiled so well out of possession. So we're in a bit of wait and see at the moment, but I do think we know who Arsenal are at this stage.
Yep. So next, a really fun game, which was Brentford Spurs. They kind of duke it out, and it finishes a 3-2 thriller, one of many thrillers in this, slate of Premier League games. A vintage Maupay scoring and doing the little dart celebration. I love that. And then Brennan Johnson scoring and then mocking it at the end. A little bit of banter between the teams at after the whistle here. But Spurs needed this result. This was I feel like a big game because Brentford with Tony are a much different side than without Tony. And so I wouldn't say this was a coin flip match, but I feel like Arsenal showed their teeth here and they were able to get the job done.
This game is a funny one. You watch Spurs play, and I don't know if you have the same takeaway, but I just think you give this 2 or 3 more transfer windows. Eventually, this thing is going to pop in a big way, at least in terms of attacking wise. I look particularly at their wingers. I think that Brennan Johnson was probably an ill-advised signing. I think that's almost a case of someone making a double jump rather than just making the small jump that he probably needed to. Going to Spurs rather than maybe going in and in between a move and then making that move.
Like where? Like a Newcastle?
I was probably thinking like West Ham.
West Ham?
That kind of bracket.
That's fair.
Yeah, get into that kind of middle bracket. I understand that it's almost wishful thinking, because if a team like that comes in for you, not only are Nottingham Forest maybe not going to be or to sell, but I also think Brendan Johnson is also like, I'd probably stay and wait for that bigger move, and maybe that would have been the best for him another year with Forest. But I think about him. I think about Kulusevski, who is good but isn't perfect. I think about Timo Werner, who I like a lot but is not ideal for the wing position. But you can already see that how much they get out of him just by the fact that it's structured so well, that he's able to get in good positions so often, that when you eventually get some top talent in those positions, they're going to pop. But for now, you get games like we had against Brentford where the talent level is not so high and they sacrifice a lot of cheap stuff. You look at Brentford, even before their first goal, They were quite lucky with a call that obviously they get the lines out and it's technically offside, but it was really, really close. That came from a cheap giveaway in early build-up. So they are right to continue with the way that they're playing, because eventually you will bring in better players. The players playing in it at the moment will be used to playing it, and either they become your depth or they're sold on for higher fees based off the back of this. They're absolutely right to stick with this. I don't really entertain the conversation that they should adjust much, but there's going to be growing pains as they go with this. They just have to bear with it. And Brentford, again, it's another example of, they've not got a good result. They're having a tough season, a tougher season compared to the previous two they've had in the Premier League. But I still palm off any major worries about them. I just think they're too well coached. And now with Tony being in there, if he stays fit, I just think they'll keep a decent distance from the relegation zone the rest of the way.
I have to agree with you on that one. And kind of going off the back of that, we got a little bit of a surprising result here. Villa, at home, kind of get thumped by Newcastle. And if you look at the past matches between these two, it's so variable. It's like one team kills the other, then the opposite. They kind of take turns just beating the shit out of each other, honestly. And I was thinking that this would be kind of more of an even match. And one team kind of forgot to turn up, and I actually thought Howe outcoached Emery here, and I was kind of surprised by that because I rate Emery more highly than I do Howe. But Newcastle seem like they're turning back in the right direction, and Howe steadied that ship after a little bit of controversy and bad things being said about him early in the season when, they were really, really struggling.
Yeah, I with this game, I almost want to play both sides of the coin a little bit with it, because on one hand, you have a game that's blown open by the fact that Newcastle take a 2-goal lead. And you look at those 2 goals. The first one's a set-piece goal, which is fairly fortunate in the way it falls to Shah. And then the second one is very fortunate with the way that it falls to Shah. With it coming off the crossbar the way it did and falling nicely for him, with a player there on the floor by the touchline, keeping him onside. I'm not sure if he would have been onside with the other players in line, but that definitely made him onside. So with that, there's a little bit of, that's just football. That's football happening. You're going to not get the rub of the green every now and then. But also to play the other side of it, they are the first team to play the Aston Villa high line in a really smart way that they did. Because Aston Villa's, their high line has been a massive talking point so far this season. They are putting up a record number of offsides since that was tracked. It's trending to be the most offsides.
Them and Liverpool, right? Like Liverpool were like the known kings of this high line.
Yeah, exactly. But Liverpool doing it with better athletes. This Villa team is just basing it off of we don't have the best athletes, but we're going to be really smart about doing it because we understand the triggers of the other team. And Newcastle played that against them. They had these dummy runners that they were using to try and trigger that, because obviously you stand up there in your high line, but eventually you don't just stand there still. You have to track back at some point to chase into the space. And they would get those guys running a second or 2 seconds before they wanted to. And it was all with the benefit of Anthony Gordon, who got in, I think, twice, maybe 3 times off the back of this. Those dummy runners would go and those feints would happen for the pass. And then Gordon would go in a completely other direction and be kept on side and got 2, I think, really good chances out of it just off those dummy runs to trigger that, to trigger the high line out of position. So, like I say, 2 goals which were fairly fortunate, but at the same time, that's about as smart as I think a team has played that high line so far this season. And what's really interesting is now that that's out there,
the blueprint.
Exactly. It's the blueprint of how you can play this. And now this is where football gets fun, because teams will try that. What's Emery going to do in response to it? This is the sicko stuff, isn't it?
This is the football sicko stuff. And I love when a guy checks and then the winger kind of makes that diagonal run kind of between the outside back and the center back. That's one of the most effective runs that you can make, especially kind of getting in on goal at a good angle. But I couldn't agree more, and we'll see how these 2 teams bounce back. If Newcastle can kind of put a couple results together here, and if Villa have kind of cooled off a little bit, they still sit top 5 in the Prem, so they're still doing pretty well. But I feel like their form has cooled off the last month or so, especially since the new year. But to kind of rotate over, probably the game of the week here so far. United barely beat Wolves. I was on this doc, making the outline and had to change it a few times. I did think Wolves would give them a good shot here at the Molineux, but United started arguably their best lineup they've had in months, and they go up to Højlund, finds the back of the net. He's starting to make that more of a habit, which is good. And it finishes 4-3. Wolves come all the way back, and then Kobe Mainu, steals the show at the end. The 18-year-old with his maiden Premier League goal with a really well taken finish here. I'm pretty high on Mainu. I've seen you tweet out about there might be a ceiling there with his athleticism, but Ten Hag was sweating on that sideline because I think he has a pretty short leash at this rate, but they get it done, and they actually showed some character, which is a step in the right direction because I feel like for a long time this United team was spineless.
Yeah. Like you say with Mainu, he's really impressive. I would want to make the point that he is going to be a really good player for a long time. I just think that we're in this stage now where, and it's kind of similar with Connor Bradley, even though he's not played as much football as Mainu, I don't think, where
that's fair.
We don't really know how good this can get. It's like, is this guy going to be this? Is this guy going to be that? And I'm almost, looking at it thinking, okay, but what could go wrong? And with Mainu, you see a player who's a little bit shorter than ideally you'd like in the at the position. So when I've seen play in transitional games and maybe lose out a little bit because he doesn't have that up tier athleticism, but he's still a great player. And obviously that goal to win the game was incredible. And maybe the blueprint is for him to play further up the field, even though he's played a lot of that deeper lying stuff for Man United. I watched him play in pre-season, and that was basically where he played most of his football and was impressive doing it. But there's a difference between pre-season football and league football, obviously.
Yeah.
With Ten Hag generally, I have made a pretty large switch on him in maybe the last 6 weeks. I was really defensive of him generally, and in the last sort of 6 weeks from middle of December onwards, I'm leaning more and more towards that this new regime that they have should maybe move on from him rather than giving him a chance to begin with. And to be honest, tonight didn't really fill me with much more confidence that it was going to get any better, even though it ended well. Same goes for the draw at home with Spurs that they had a little while ago, which is on paper like an okay result. But you watch the game and it's like, oh my God, the discrepancy between these two teams and what their purpose is so large. So they're going to be an interesting watch. Wolves, I'm really low on. I think they already have enough points to stay up so far this season, but I'm not impressed with them at all. And Man United made a pig's ear out of beating them. So
a pig's ear.
Is
Can
that
I get a translation? That is a Britishism. I was actually thinking about making a whole list of all the ones I hear and then having you just translate for me what this means. But I'd love a quick summation of that. What is that? A pig's ear?
Oh, pigs! Oh, just making life difficult for yourself, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah,
kind of like shooting your own foot.
Yeah, well, yeah. If something should be fairly simple and you make it harder than it should be, it's like what is it? Something out of a mole out of a something house. So there's another phrase for this, isn't there? That might be another British one as well. But yeah, make it a job that should be fairly easy, fairly difficult, which I think is a good way to describe Man United getting 3 points from Molineux tonight.
No, absolutely, and these are two managers, like you said in the last pod. You aren't that high on Gary O'Neill, so two managers that we both aren't convincing. I think I'm more convinced on Gary O'Neill than Ten Hag at this rate, but at least United bounced back, and then on the other side of this, Palace were able to mount a comeback against Sheffield here. I was kind of calling for Palace to kind of part ways with good old Roy, and they went down in this match. Diaz again with another goal from on loan. He's been a revelation since he joined up, and then I think it was McAtee, the City loanee, who scored another goal. But at the end of the day, the point I made is, look, if you get Eze and Olise on the field together, good things will come. And that's what happened today. I think Eze had 2 goals, Olise had 1, and I think Olise had a couple assists as well. And then he goes down injured, which is just a sad state that he's finding himself in constantly as he puts gym performances and they can't stay healthy. And I mean, I think clubs will still look and poach Eze and Elise, but Elise needs to put a couple games together to kind of prove himself that he can be sustainable on the pitch.
Yeah, you think of Palace in a big picture sense, and their issue is almost what you've hinted at there, that you can't really speak about Elise or speak about Eze in complimentary terms without the next thing that you're going to say being in reference to them getting a move, because that's kind of who Crystal Palace have penciled themselves in as at this stage. And that goes back to the Roy conversation, who is, had a great career as a football manager and done a lot of great things. But in terms of a long-term strategy, you probably need to get something in there where when you get to the contract table, which I know Elise has recently signed an extension, but when you're thinking long-term project, are you going to get someone in who is going to push up against the big six and what's become the big eight and now kind of the big nine that's pushing down back on you in order to keep those players? Palace would probably say in response to that, that might not actually be their plan. They're pretty happy with the churn that they have of making profit on these players. And then that ends up getting into a modern football conversation, which is why you see that banner in the away end at the Emirates a couple of weeks ago. So we could go on about this for ages and ages in time that we don't have, but that's kind of the situation Palace find themselves in. And hopefully for now, they can just enjoy watching their fun players do a lot of fun things. And much like Brentford, I think they've just got a little bit too much to get seriously worried about relegation.
Yeah, and they do have a fairly good spine, I will say, but obviously, they're probably, their headache is just having Eze and Elise on the pitch together. Because I could see them kind of making a run here towards the mid-table a little bit more and securing themselves in mid-table if they can just keep those guys healthy. And then we have a pretty shocking result. This was probably the most shocking of the entire week. Luton just absolutely humble Brighton. And you could say, from the literal kickoff, they humbled Brighton because they scored within a minute of the game. De Zerbi with all these jobs opening has gotten a lot of plaudits for, okay, he's going to make the move. But when you see these weird results like Luton crushing you, I don't know. Do you think this was kind of a fluke game where you bury the tape and you just don't really watch it, or is this kind of a more concerning result here?
Yeah, I would say it's almost the opposite of burn the tape. This is De Zerbi's problem. I think we spoke a little bit about this, but not in great depth about De Zerbi. But he's got a real issue that he needs to sort out in terms of his coaching model, because a similar game happened last season when Brighton had all of the players that they'd sold in the summer, when they played Everton at home, when Everton were fighting relegation and Brighton were in those European spots trying to secure a place. And I think Everton won that game. I think, was it maybe 4-0 or 5-1? They won it by a lot of goals and they were 3-0 up after about 30 minutes. A similar, blitz start that they had. And the problem that he has is that if you play against a team with good athletic, with big athletic players who don't want to press your front line and then will get onto your second phase of build-up aggressively in a man-to-man pressing way, they don't really have an answer off the back of this. They don't have much of a plan B. And also they've prioritized technicality so much that when they get into a physical battle like that, they can get bullied. They're a team that can get bullied badly. And guess what? If you bring that to a team like, let's just use Liverpool, for example, because that job's opening up. If you bring that to Liverpool, you won't get as badly bullied because you've got some better athletes in there with Curtis Jones and Soboslai, etc. But your game plan is still going to be incredibly flawed in terms of how you get the ball up the pitch. That's the main issue. And like I say, this came up already last season. It's coming up again now. I'm surprised it doesn't come up more. Teams seem to be set on doing what they do rather than swallowing their pride a little bit, especially the teams who aren't right up there at the top, swallowing their pride and saying, let's just do exactly what they don't want us to do. Maybe we'll see more of that. But yeah, this is like a very concerning thing for De Zerbi. I think that this is something that you focus on and you say, we've really got to get this sorted for both this team and for De Zerbi if he wants to keep climbing the ladder, so to speak, as a head coach.
Yep. And this, like you kind of said, and we prefaced beforehand, this was kind of a blueprint game to beat Brighton here. But on the other hand, shout out Luton. I mean, no one gave them even a slight chance of staying up, and they've made their home stand impenetrable. They're now out of the relegation zone by in 17th here. So it's Sheffield, Burnley, Everton, and then Luton. You got Forest right above you, and Forest are struggling. So there might be a scenario where Luton stay up. I still would think Everton could get it together to fight this relegation fight. They're absolute veterans at getting out of the relegation scrap last second, but this might be the year that doesn't happen. But credit's due. If you can win at home or get results at home, that's really what matters in the Prem. And if you want to be a great team, you got to win both away at home, obviously. But if you want to just survive, you just got to make your home a fortress and then try to nick one or two games away. So credit is where credit's due here with Luton beating Brighton. Did not expect that one, but I did like what you said about De Zerbi. And sometimes people are so obsessed with playing their way, especially the tiki-taka type beautiful football that me and you both love to watch. But sometimes you just gotta, as an English term, get it launched. Just fucking put your foot through the ball and then run onto it. You have Welbeck up there. Let him hold up the play and let João Pedro play off of it. I just don't really understand that aspect. Like, just adapt a little bit to who you're playing, especially at Luton. But I mean, that's just me here. And then our last,
just to go off the back of that, the game that basically decided the title last season, Man City versus Arsenal at the Etihad, where Manchester City won 4-1. That game was won off the back of Pep deciding to go long against Arsenal's press because they were giving Haaland so much space. So no, you should never be too proud to adjust against what the other team is giving you in a big way. So that's just an example of that. So I thought that was relevant to what you were saying there.
That's excellent recall. I could not do that. So shout out to you. You've recalled 2 matches from last season that I would never remember. And then the last result, not really much to get from this game. Bournemouth tie West Ham at home. I would expected someone to get a winner here, but it just never really came. Both teams didn't really seem that interested, honestly, in getting the winner. They were pretty satisfied with getting a point here. So not much to discuss about that, but I feel like that's a fair result for both teams, kind of where they are. To kind of go to La Liga, Barcelona, after digesting the news of Xavi kind of stepping down at the end of the season, they're able to kind of get a scrappy win here. And who else but Vitor Roque? Ferran Torres went down fairly early, and Xavi threw on Fermin Lopez, and I was just kind of yelling at my TV, why not give Vitor Roque a shot here? And he's gotten limited minutes, and you signed him, and he was on fire in Brazil. Give the kid a shot. And he gets a shot, and then he scores immediately. So that's what you love to see from, young talents, especially on the biggest stage in the world, arguably one of the biggest clubs in the world. So I'm happy with that, but don't have, this is kind of the DNA for Barcelona right now, just winning every game pretty scrappy. At some point, this won't be the case anymore, but this is kind of the state of affairs for Barcelona right now.
Yeah. You mentioned there about giving him a chance in the team. We had a conversation the last time I was on about my team, Juventus, and what they should do moving forward. And I kind of preached the idea, if you have this really good young crop, you're in financial troubles, back the young crop, get a manager in who's going to coach them well and get them to play the type of football that will get the best out of them, even if in a more morbid way you think like let's get the best out of them in terms of turning profits on them, which you hate to say, but is the reality of football. That was the direction I was preaching. Feels similar for Barcelona. Feels similar, and their financial troubles are much worse than Juventus's. It feels like, why would you not, with all these young players that you have, headlined by Pedri and Gavi, just go with those guys and just keep your hands in your pockets financially and let this young crop that you've come up with, guys like that who have come through La Masia or been pinched from other academies, and then other players like you mentioned there who you've got from South America, and just let those guys headline it. And maybe you won't win La Liga, but you'll have a lot of fun and your fans will enjoy it, and you'll be able to get your finances in order, which is the main pressing issue that they have. You mentioned there as well about Xavi. He's kind of the opposite side of the spectrum of Klopp leaving, where one of them brings out a ceremonious reaction, and now it's all about trying to win as many trophies as possible. In his last season, Xavi on the opposite side, it's almost like you feel like you're trudging through the mud to get to the end of this season, which almost feels a little bit unfair because he did win La Liga, but overall it's not been a great experience. Just to speak a little bit about him as a head coach, I think one of the things that you'll be graded on just in a really simple way as a head coach is who are your best players and are you getting the best out of them? And Ilkay Gundogan has been turned into like a Scott McTominay-esque workhorse at times in this team. And that, in a nutshell, I think reflects pretty badly on him. You can tell Gundogan is frustrated by his role as well. And I don't blame him. He's been reduced to just a small amount of the player that he was at Man City, and that was not that long ago. That was only last season. So,
and he was one of the best midfielders in the entire Premier League last season. I mean, he single-handedly at times when KDB was out was carrying that City team. So I like what you said, but I think not to interrupt you, but I think the downfall here with what has happened is Sergio Busquets. Right? You did not really address that. You try to bring in for cheap Oriol Romeu. He has been completely dreadful this season, and you have a gaping hole in midfield at the pivot, and you're wanting Frankie de Jong and Gundogan to kind of help in that build-up, and both those players aren't really natural sixes as well. They're more eights, in my opinion. So I think the biggest signing that needs to be made by Barcelona is that number 6 position, because I think that will help Frankie and Gundogan kind of get to play, their playmaking roles. But at the same time, he has given so many youngsters, just La Masia youngsters, a chance, not really Victor Roque. And he just did come in January, so he probably wanted to make sure that he was ready before. So, if you start out bad as a striker, then it's sometimes hard for your mental, especially at a young age, to kind of bounce back. But I thought that was a pretty good summation of Barca. On the other hand, Atletico Madrid, they stay alive versus Rayo. Kind of a scrappy game, a classic Simeone fixture. All you need to do to get the pie rolling was threaten Moise Kean to come in, and he starts banging in goals week in and week out. So that's good to see from him. Not much to say about this match, so we'll move on. But they keep coming up the table, and it's going to be an interesting race for the top 4. And then Madrid, which we've spoke ad nauseum about on the last pod we kind of did together. They kind of cruised past Getafe. Nothing really much to say about this one either, other than another game, another fairly easy finish, and Getafe could have made it a little bit more interesting at the end. They just could not convert their chances. But Rudiger injured, so that's another injury for Madrid that could be an interesting eye on the title race. But yeah, that's really it for me.
Yeah, like you say, it's a lot of business as usual, isn't it? Just things ticking over. Real Madrid winning games, not at a canter, but just doing enough to get over the line. So yeah, it's almost La Liga as a whole, in terms of what we've just been given, is a lot of we'll see you again next game week. Not a lot of change there. Absolutely,
and I'm sure that I was actually watching their attacking structure, and that probably, for a tactical perspective, drives people mad. Just I don't know how they do it, but they continue just to turn out results, and there's just no positional play, or it's just kind of free flowing. Just get someone the ball, then let some magic happen with some last minute darting runs. It seems. The move to Serie A, Roma make it 2 in a row for De Rossi. They seem to be kind of back here. So good to see that Roma's kind of, gaining steam. Again, we'll see if this new manager bounce continues to roll. People now have tape on De Rossi and how they set up. So maybe we'll see if he can be a little bit flexible tactically, and see if teams will set up to make it a little bit difficult for Roma to break down. And then we have AFCON. So, probably the tournament with the most parity I think I've ever witnessed. Cape Verde beat Mauritania. Ivory Coast beat Senegal shockingly in pens. I did not expect that. I mean, I knew it was going to be a good game, but I thought Senegal, the ex-winners, would kind of show their experience here and kind of see it out. But it was at least fun to watch some pens. It's been a while, it feels like, since I've watched a penalty shootout. Mali beats Burkina Faso. And then South Africa shock Morocco. Probably the biggest result of the whole tournament. Maybe not the whole tournament, but of the knockouts so far. I really expected Morocco to get it done. Ashraf Hakimi misses the penalty off the crossbar to kind of tie it up to go into extra time, and then South Africa kind of get a late goal. But hey, South Africa might be back. I haven't really heard much of them since the World Cup in
2010 was that
2010, which that's like, as a kid, that's probably the first one I remember. I was 10 years old, but with the Jubilani and all that classic stuff, Steven Pienaar especially. But we do have an interesting quarterfinals here. Mali versus Ivory Coast. Who do you think is going to win that? Get some predictions going.
Yeah, it's funny because you almost feel like Ivory Coast, you can't bet against them. It feels like their luck's in. They got 3 points in a group that they progressed through, and now they've won a penalty shootout. And it feels like it's all falling their way at their African Cup of Nations. So you just got to ride the hot hand with this one. Tournament football's very strange, and I'm just going to ride the hot hand with that and probably just put that in as a 2-1 win.
Okay, wait, for Ivory Coast?
Yeah, Ivory Coast.
Okay. I just want to make sure. And then, all right, so I'm going to agree with you. I think Ivory Coast get the job done, especially after they beat Senegal. I mean, it could be a big letdown game after that big victory, or they can keep it rolling. So it really depends on how they're coached. And I believe they're the manager who they sacked their manager without even knowing that they made it through. So That should be an interesting development to keep your eye on. Cape Verde play South Africa. Actually, I'm going to go and back South Africa in this match against Cape Verde, but do not count out Cape Verde.
No, exactly. I'm going to go with you as well on this one. Obviously, we don't want to agree on everything, but I agree on that as well. I'll probably put that in as probably a 2-0.
And then maybe the biggest debate one is DR Congo versus Guinea. Who do you think is going to win this one?
Yeah, this one probably is a bit more controversial out of all of them. This will probably be the most, I mean, it's hard to predict in tournament football again, but this will probably be the most interesting of the quarterfinals in terms of a close game. Probably won't work out that way now I've said it, but I do expect it to be quite close. But I will back Guinea in this one. I think just from what I've seen.
Interesting. I'm gonna flip it on. I'm gonna pick Congo just so we don't have a clean all the way through. I was hoping you'd pick Congo because I do like Guinea in this match, but I'm gonna back Congo.
No, fair enough.
And then last but not least,
you go first on this one, so that if we have the same one again, I'll flip it.
Okay. Well, Nigeria is obviously, I think, gonna kind of do their thing against Angola. Nigeria, with the defensive frailties that they had, I thought they wouldn't get far in the tournament, and they kind of completely proved me wrong. So I'm going to back Nigeria to kind of keep rolling here.
That fits perfectly because I'm going to go with Angola. I was going to go with them anyway because I feel like in tournaments, all my other three were pretty chalk, and it's never going to be the case in a tournament, international tournament, that is, that all four of a quarterfinal will go chalk. There'll always be something which is going to throw in there, like take the World Cup, for example, Morocco beating Portugal. There's always one that goes in there. And just from looking at these two sides and seeing a side that's fairly solid in what they do with Angola versus a side like Nigeria, where if you were to look at one of the teams that is well favoured, but also you can pick some questions with them, they're probably that side. So yeah, I'm happy to go with Angola and have this as the upset pick.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Feel free to yell at me and Euan if we get all of these wrong. Now to go to the Asian Cup. Japan beat Bahrain. Iran beat Syria in penalties, but Taremi did get sent off. So that's a big development for the quarterfinals. Uzbekistan beats Thailand, who's been a nice surprise this tournament. And South Korea barely edge versus Saudi Arabia in penalties. So the quarterfinals, quick fire. Iran versus Japan, probably the best, match that there will be. But a Taremi-less Iran is really gonna, I feel like, make this an easy pick. I'm gonna go with Japan here.
Yeah, again, that won't be. I won't be putting my shock pick on Iran here. Yeah, I think it's pretty chalk in this game, and I think they do probably win pretty comfortably, Japan. So yeah, I'll go with them here.
All right, Qatar versus Uzbekistan. Who you backing here?
Almost as a side prediction, this will be like my goes to penalties prediction. I think
Okay.
I think this is a game that probably ends as I say this because I think the game could be quite boring, but it could end up going to penalties at 0-0, and you get an extra time where you watch two teams just try not to concede. I know that doesn't fit in with what's happened so far for these teams exactly, but I just see a bit of a stalemate matchup here of weaknesses on weaknesses and strengths on strengths. So yeah, put me down as penalties for this one, and then again, and from there I'll have to pick a winner. So
Let's hear it.
I'll go Qatar on pens. I'll go Qatar.
The host of the tournament. I'm gonna back Uzbekistan's hot hand here. I think they continue to turn out and a good story. Tajikistan versus Jordan. I'm gonna go out and just say I think Jordan wins this pretty comfortably.
Yeah, again, that's you're on the right side of this one. I think they'll be pretty comfortable in this game. So yeah, this is we're putting little sides on our predictions here. This is the game which might be a switch off after 60 minutes one based off the scoreline.
Yep, and then Australia versus South Korea, arguably probably the best game. I take that back on Iran, Japan. I think this will be the best game. Australia have been sneaky good, so I'm gonna back. This is a tough one. South Korea hasn't completely convinced me yet, but if they can just rely on a pretty fairly good roster, but I'm gonna go with the upside. I'm gonna pick Australia.
Fair enough. I'm gonna go with South Korea, based in a big way off the fact that a lot of Australian people that I follow and keep up with, some for football, some for cricket. There's another Britishism, but
I know what that is.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, but all the ones that I follow, regardless of what it's for, are obviously all invested in this tournament to a certain extent, and all seem to be pretty unhappy with what's going on with their team. They seem to each have complaints. So as much as I have my own thoughts on the team, I'm not as bought into it as they are. I have my own thoughts that I'm not overly impressed by them, but I think it just based off that, I would probably give them the nod here. But I'm going to go with those guys. I'm going to put my faith in those who know it better, and hopefully it works out well for me in the predictions.
The Socceroos. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. Before the break, please follow us on Twitter at Fulltime Roundup. Like, subscribe, download, give us a rating so it helps us spread our brand. Follow Euan. Can you give your handle? Sorry, I forgot to put that.
No worries. What is my handle? Is it Euan_R or is it Euan_R_? It's _Euan_R. At
_Euan_R.
Yep.
There we go. And then mine is at Liverpool CLTFC. After the break, we're going to go through the transfers and have maybe a segment if we have time, and then the prediction show at the end. We will be right back. Welcome back. Now I know Euan's handle, which is good. So that's my fault on being a horrible host here. But we do.
It's worse that I couldn't remember what it was myself.
Yeah, that was a lapse of concentration, kind of like Burnley between both of us here. But we had a very quiet January transfer, and I thought that was interesting. Usually it's really just the Prem tripling, quadrupling, the spending, everyone else. But with these new FFP kind of restrictions that have been, I think clubs are pretty scared to sell. And I think we're finally seeing that, this over expenditure and leveraging your future for the now is kind of starting to catch up with clubs. So it's good as a finance guy to kind of see that people are actually controlling their spending. But there were some still interesting transfers. I wouldn't say expensive transfers, but interesting nonetheless. So one I wanted to highlight was, Marcos Leonardo from Sao Paulo to Benfica. He's already scored 3 goals since his move to Benfica. But yeah, I've already mentioned that, so we can move on. Angelino actually got a loan to Roma, and he's wearing the number 69, which I would love to ask him why he decided to wear the number 69. Just thought a little banter there.
It, hasn't he?
Has he? I missed that if so, but I'd love to hear the reasoning for that. I just thought that was fairly funny, especially on Twitter. Rakitic wearing the jersey now, the Sevilla jersey. He went to El Shabab, so he's now gone from Sevilla. Bowie, 31 million, right back to Bayern from Galatasaray. Lucas Beraldo, $21 million center back from Sao Paulo. He's gotten some game time since coming over. I'd say probably the best one that I've seen, Arthur Vermeeren, from Antwerp to Atletico Madrid for 19 million, 18-year-old Belgian. That's probably the best one I've seen. But how about you? Have you seen any other ones that have really kept your, perked up your interest?
No, like you say, it's been everyone's kind of kept their hands in the pockets, haven't they? I think the theme of this transfer window is these reclamation project loans that we're seeing. That seems to be almost the flavour of the January transfer window now. Just teams who have spent maybe ill-advisedly in the past now trying to find ways to get those players to new destinations and see what they can do. I think the main two are obviously Sancho and Calvin Phillips. Jadon Sancho going back to Borussia Dortmund and Calvin Phillips going on loan to West Ham and made his full debut for them against Bournemouth tonight. Going to be interesting to see how those two do, and just if this is a theme that continues for these big money signings. If we see them come back again in the summer window, whether this is just kind of the fate of these January loans that we see. But yeah, going to be interesting to see how they do. I think you brought this up not too long ago on the pod, but Ian Maatsen playing for Borussia Dortmund, getting football again. That's going to be an interesting one. He's someone who Pochettino identified as someone who should play further up the field, it seemed, which I was very much against. So I'm hoping that Borussia Dortmund can give him the minutes required in the position which he's thrived in already. And then you get into a situation where in the summer he could go anywhere. So yeah, that'll be the interesting one for me, just to watch a good football player do good things, and then obviously the way it leads into the summer, just seeing what he'll do from there. So yeah, a generally quiet January transfer window, but I don't really mind it. Keeps the focus on the actual football, which is always a plus.
Absolutely. Just to name a few more, Zaragoza, left winger from Granada, made his move to Bayern, 13 million, 22 years old. He's got that almost Messi stature, how he kind of weaves with the ball. He's very short as well. That's kind of my comp for him, a poor man's Messi, I guess you could say. And then, Lyon, who are struggling right now, did some buying. Fofana, 18 million from Ghent, 18 years old. And then Gift Orban, 12 million from Ghent as well to Lyon. So you got some attackers there. Also signed Nemanja Matic. Let's see here. Another one that I was pretty infatuated with that I haven't seen him play, but I just from the comps I've heard, Santiago Castro, 19-year-old Vélez Starfield player to Bologna for 12 mil. I think this was a sensible signing just because they're probably knowing that they'll move on from Xerxes in the summer for a big money move. So they're kind of already lining that up with that in mind. So we'll see if he gets, some game time, or they'll kind of protect him and let him kind of get integrated in the squad first. Daniel Munoz, the Colombian right back, went to Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace also signed a center mid. Are you familiar with that player from the championship, I believe?
Adam Wharton.
Adam Wharton. Do you rate him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's very good. I think that's a good move for him as well. Like we mentioned earlier with Crystal Palace, the way that they do give those players a chance and rather cynically sell them on for those profits rather than trying to build around them. They're a club. The benefit of that is that you can sign players like these because you put the examples in front of them of these are the players we've developed and we haven't really stood in their way at all, apart from Wilfried Zaha, which is its own situation in terms of letting them develop and move on. So yeah, a really, really sensible signing, and he's going to be really fun for them because he's a really fun player.
Absolutely. One that kind of stood out as well as far as Mbagna, 23-year-old Cameroonian from Bodo Glimt, went to Marseille for 8.2 mil. He scored 15 goals and 5 assists for Bodo. So that's a pretty sensible signing for Marseille as they let Oliveira move to Genoa. Got some Americans on the move. Johnny Cardoso from Independiente, 6.2 mil. To Betis, 22 years old. I think he really wants to make an impact for the national team. So moving to a top 5 league was a big priority for him. And he's actually kind of slot right in to that that Bates' team. Gio Reyna also got loaned to Forest. We'll see if that's going to be a good move or not. I'm not really sure, but any playing time is good playing time for Reyna. So hopefully Santos decides to play him. And then Thiago Jallo, 3.7 million from Lille to Juve, 23-year-old Portuguese player. I've heard a lot of good things about him, but haven't really gotten to watch him. Have you?
No, I haven't watched a ton of him, and also someone who probably won't play a ton. Just feels like
You don't think so?
No, I think he's probably a depth piece who you could put on a nice wage, and he gets to play for a club like Juventus, which for a lot of players is not as attractive as it used to be. But for someone like him, it's probably still a very attractive proposal. So yeah, I don't suspect we'll see a ton of football from him. Also based off the fact that centre-back position has some decent young players there for Juventus at the moment. So a combination of those two probably won't play much, but yeah, decent depth signing.
To piggyback off him, Juventus also signed for the loan with an option to buy for Carlos Alcaraz. I was actually really impressed with him last season at kind of the end of Southampton, and he's kind of moved in. I feel like he could bring a little bit of spark to creativity that Juventus is maybe missing in that midfield. Do you feel the same, or do you think he'll be another depth piece?
I agree with you that he was quite a fun watch towards the end of last season. I think the further up you get him up the field, from what I've seen of him, and I'm no specialist on him, the further up you get him up the field, the better his performances are. That area of the field for Juventus is very specialised because Allegri obviously dedicates a lot of players to doing the defensive side of the game, that you're almost left with two players who are fully dedicated forward line players. And that, at full strength, is probably Vlahovic playing with Chiesa just off him a little bit. So I wonder if we're going to get to see him much at his best position. And I wonder if by the time the summer comes around, with a player who will have been on loan for a decent amount of games, with a big fee that would be there if they want to pay it, will leave a lot of people saying, why would they do this? Based off him maybe not playing a ton of football, and when he does, playing at a position or in positions which don't suit his game mostly. So I'm you can probably tell I'm a little bit skeptical about this signing, but it's not because I don't like the player. I think the player's is fun, but I don't quite like the match in the same way that I probably wouldn't like the match of a lot of fun players when it comes to Juventus as currently constructed.
That's an excellent point. I feel like 40 million is an expensive dollar sign for a player of that stature, but at the same time, this is probably a long-term look, especially with Allegri, maybe his future in doubt. If they get more of attack-minded, coach in, then he might flourish in that position. So it'll be an interesting thing to keep your eye on.
Yeah, similar with Jallo as well. That you can put that under there. I think he's only 23. So yeah, you can maybe put them into similar brackets, even though the money discrepancy is large there if we do pay that full fee for Alcaraz.
Gotcha. And then just to recap, De Donker went to Napoli and on loan. Elif Elmas went to Leipzig from Napoli to kind of like for like there. Guedes went to Villarreal. Dragusin and Werner kind of joined up at Tottenham. Dahoud went to Stuttgart after struggling to kind of get PT at Brighton here. That could be an interesting one for Stuttgart. Dyer went to Bayern, just to recap. And then kind of the last one that I've heard a lot of good things is Baldassani to Roma from Empoli, 20 years old, Italian, 10 million. Got a sell-on clause. Apparently he's one of the highest ceilings of an Italian player at this moment at a pretty ripe age. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how De Rossi uses him and if they can get the best out of him. 10 million is not a bad price to pay, but I obviously kind of scratch my head why Empoli are going to kind of doing this at this point when they're probably fighting for survival. And now we have our prediction show. Not too many games because we already did AFCON and Asia Cup, but we'll do it nonetheless. To start out, Liverpool, another London side, Liverpool versus Arsenal. I'm going to obviously back Liverpool in this game, but it is at the Emirates, I believe, so that could skew this match a little bit, but I'm still going to back them. I'm going to say it's a 2-1 win.
Yeah, I obviously these two teams played not that long ago, Well, not that long ago, considering the cup, but even if you extend that on, the league game that they played against each other as well was played just around Christmas time. So these two teams are pretty familiar with each other. First game was a draw. Second game with Liverpool playing a little bit of a weaker side, they won.
Still won.
But won the game, but with a fairly even. Could have gone either way. Ultimately, they prevailed. And I'm finding it hard to deviate too much from this game being a draw. I think, I don't know, maybe Arsenal playing at home could give them the edge, but I just see Liverpool having a nice tactical advantage over them with the way the two teams set up. So put me down for a draw, but I'll make it a little bit more exciting. I'll go for a 2-2.
Okay. Hopefully you're wrong on that one, as Liverpool kind of try to storm their way to the title. To Spain, we have Girona versus Real Sociedad, two top 5 teams or top 6 teams right now. This will be an interesting one to break down. Still no Kubo, but Real Sociedad just keep getting the job done. Is Girona going to struggle here, or are they going to prevail?
Doubling up here. This will probably be a draw as well, I feel like. Because I don't want to poot the party too much for Girona, but I do like Sociedad and the way that they set up. But I will give them kind of the benefit of the doubt and give them at least a point in this game. This again, I've got a draw in this one, 1-1. And this, if you do, it's at a difficult time with it being on. It should be okay maybe for depending on time zone, but it's on Saturday, 8 p.m. UK time, 9 p.m. Spain time, which I think is about 3-4 o'clock for you guys.
3 o'clock is usually that late kickoff.
Yeah, but if you do get the opportunity to watch this game, it will be fascinating. So it'll be well worth a watch. But yeah, I'll give it a draw.
2 draws in a row. Okay, so Real Madrid versus Atletico Madrid, the Madrid derby here. I'm thinking a lot of goals, especially with Rudiger kind of dropping out here. I'm going to go. I hate that I'm doing this. I'm copying you here. I'm going to go 2-2 draw here.
Well, you're not copying me on this game because I'll deviate from the draws on this one. I think Real Madrid will win, and I think they will win by 3 goals. I'm not sure if they'll win 3-0 or 4-1. And we've spoken before. I'm not really a Real Madrid guy so much, but I feel like you got to pick your spots with this stuff, and if you feel a certain way about it with the way the two teams match up, just got to go with it. And it's unlikely that'll happen, but I get this feeling that this game really it gets more and more personal the more these two teams match up, and I think the Real Madrid match up really nicely to this Athletic team, and they'll think, let's have these tonight. They'll set up in the way that they usually do. It won't be overly impressive, but I think there's a good chance to get an early goal, and then they'll take the game by the scruff of the neck from there. So yeah, put me down for. I'll go with 3-0. 3-0 sounds less out there than 4-1. So give me that.
I'm gonna go with. That will probably be a game I take Real Madrid money line then. So thank you for that little bit of advice there from you.
Don't hold me to it though.
I will be Venmo requesting you if it was.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I will also be taking the over in that. No betting segment today, so I will have some money on this game. Go to Germany. Bayern play Gladbach. Gladbach was able to kind of stifle Leverkusen last week. Will they be able to do the same with Bayern?
No, I got a Bayern win on this one. I think Bayern will win again, probably by 3 or 4 goals. I think what's happened is Bayern dangled the carrot a little bit in terms of the result that they had at home. Was it against Werder Bremen? They lost. Yeah, and they had that little gap given up that was, started to have people dreaming. I know you spoke about it on the podcast. I think that's given them the nudge, even though I'm not overly impressed by them tactics-wise. I think they've just got so many good players that now they're going to think, okay, now we have our run. Now we have our run of winning this many games in a row and just putting the pressure on Leverkusen, who they play in the next game, I think I'm correct in saying. So they'll want to get right for that game, and I can see them putting in a very intimidating performance in this one. And yeah, put me down for they've been a bit defensively frail, so I'll give Mönchengladbach a goal and predict 4-1 in this game.
Wow, another over game here. I sure hope that doesn't happen because I'm all in on Xavi Ball, but you're probably right on this one. Now, you do have some skin in this game. Inter Milan versus Juventus. Are you going to back your team here?
Oh. I'm a bit worried about this game. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I do not see Juve. I don't see Juve winning this game in any way. Unless there's that little bit of kind of Juve magic where anything can happen in these big games. I look at this game, I look at the way the two teams have played, and unless we're talking about a Vlahovic unreal display in a 1-0 win where he scores the goal and he's doing everything to try and change the field, tilt, and everything like that, I don't see a win at all. They can maybe fluke a draw. I think Inter will probably win this game maybe 3-1. I think they'll pull them apart in early build-up, and it's going to be Juve are Italy's team, and whenever they're in crisis, the media is on them, and I wouldn't be surprised if on Monday there is a massive referendum on Juve as a whole in terms of their direction. I think it could be that bad of a game. I'm really not confident at all, so I can't even back them in a prediction. So yeah,
that's
3-1 Inter.
That's telling stuff. I'm gonna also back Inter here. I think I agree with most of what you said. I think it'll be closer than you're giving your side credit for. I think it'll be like a 1-2-0 win. I think Inter will completely play Juventus off the pitch, but just due to how they set up, I'm gonna back Inter nonetheless.
I'll say this as well on this game, just quickly. This isn't really tactical stuff. This isn't how football works, but it also kind of is. We won at San Siro last year against Inter in a very cagey game. We would need that to happen again, and it's very unlikely we'd be able to do that in back-to-back seasons. So even just adding that in makes me feel not confident. So yeah, that's just a little piece based off of last season.
He's thought this one through, folks. Atalanta versus Lazio. I think this will be a fun one. I'm going to back Atalanta here. I think that the Catalara has just been fantastic. It's hard not to back Atalanta here. I think it'll be a 2-1 win.
Yep, I'm going to agree with you on that one. Atalanta are probably the second just plainly fun team, second most fun team in Serie A. So I'm happy to back them wherever I can. And against Lazio, don't mind doing that. So yeah, they'll win this game. I'll give them, I'll probably say 2-0. Decent stiff arm on the opposition, and again another game that. And generally, when it comes to Atalanta, if you can watch them, if you get the opportunity, if their fixtures fall right, I would encourage it because there's just a lot of fun players playing in a fun style, which we touched on the last time I was on. So yeah, I think they'll win this game.
And then we have two games, some interesting games in the Netherlands. Excuse me. Ajax versus PSV, a little derby here. Ajax have climbed their way up the table. They could use the points. PSV, after their perfect start, have faltered a little bit, but this could be a fantastic get right game. I'm gonna back PSV here.
Yeah,
I feel like a fraud though.
No, come on. I mean, the form is unreal. It would seem silly to pick against them. Again, maybe the fact that it's a derby game and that brings a little bit of variance there, but it feels like a season where it would be wrong if Ajax were to win this game. It feels like this will go down where the Ajax fans will convince themselves that maybe something can happen, anything can happen on Derby Day, and then they find themselves going 2-0 down in the 70th minute and just kind of rolls out as a damn squib. So yeah, give me PSV and give me them probably 2 or 3-0. I'll keep it at 2-0. I'll keep it a little bit conservative.
I will say PSV completely outplayed Ajax earlier this season, so I think Ajax at least have a chip on their shoulder here. Hopefully we don't see any fan trouble like we did last time. But to move on to the last game, AZ Alkmaar versus Feyenoord. Both teams have kind of sucked as of late. Don't really know how to handicap this one. I'm just going to back the better team, which is Feyenoord here, but I think this could easily be a draw.
Yeah, it's certainly on the table. It'll be an interesting game. Again, if people have the opportunity to see this one, I would encourage it because I like Feyenoord and I really like their manager. I think Arne Slot is someone who is going to be seen in a different league very soon. Could well be the Premier League. I don't think he'll stay around there much longer. It feels like they've hit their ceiling. So just to get a little bit of a read on him, this game could maybe be an interesting one on slot there. So I'll give them the win on this one. I'll give them a win and say I'll bump up the scores and say probably about 3-1. But yeah, again, a game that would be interesting to watch if you do get the opportunity, because they play some really interesting football. That's the type of football that is winning in Europe at the moment as well. So yeah, well worth a watch.
Well, again, Euan, thank you so much for coming on. It was super last minute, guys. So, if you're thankful to not hear my voice for 30 to 40 minutes straight of just all me, then you deserve to give Euan a nice DM at _UNR to thank him for coming on today and providing his wonderful insight. Again, follow the Twitter at Fulltime Roundup. Interact with us. We'd love to, chat about football or anything else. Or if you think we missed anything, feel free to chime in. Give us a rating, 5-star specifically. Download, follow, subscribe, and we will see you on Sunday night.